Let's talk about the classification systems of aortic dissection, because there are two classification systems that exist, and both of them are what surgical physicians and consultants use interchangeably. The most clinically used one is the Stanford, which has got two types. It has got A and B. Type A is any dissection that involves the ascending aorta. This can be with or without the descending part involvement. Basically, this is what happens in around 2/3 of all dissections. It is a surgical emergency that requires OR because it is at high risk of retrograde propagation that can lead to tamponade, coronary occlusion, aortic insufficiency. Type B is the dissection that is limited to descending aorta. This is in the remaining 1/3 of dissections, and the management is mostly medical, whereby we would control the blood pressure of the patient. These patients can go to OR for surgical or endovascular repair, but it is generally reserved for complicated cases like if there is some malperfusion, rupture, or rapid expansion of the dissection. The other classification is the DeBakey classification, which is in 3 groups. So type 1 DeBakey is basically ascending aorta and it extends beyond the innominate artery distally. Type 2 is ascending aorta only and extension is limited to the level of innominate artery. Type 3 is at or distal to the subclavian artery. So what they say is, for ease of understanding, type 1 and type 2 can correspond to Stanford A, so they would require OR. Type 3 corresponds to Stanford type B. Let's talk about the clinical features and presentations of these patients. So the average patient or average age of presentation of these patients is around 60 years, 64 to be precise, and 65% of these patients are going to be males. Hypertension is the most common risk factor that is present in majority of the population. The textbook presentation is abrupt, severe, sharp chest pain of maximal intensity from the onset. Although the pain can be in the chest, it can also be described in the central upper back, and there will be some kind of associated apprehension where patients often feel like they are dying, because there's a very good chance that they might be if no interventions are done. If we talk about pain radiation by the type, in ascending aorta, which is a type A Stanford, the pain is radiating to the anterior chest or it goes to the neck. But if it involves the descending aorta, which is the type B Stanford, then the pain can go to the back, can be in the abdomen, can even go down to the legs. Migratory pain is a pain that moves as the dissection propagates. This is described in about 1/3 of the patients, and it is a key historical feature. But here's the thing. In reality, these patients actually present with a spectrum of pain, and some patients don't even present with any pain. Up to 1/3 of these patients in reality may have an atypical symptom or presentation, and this disease can mimic anything, which is why it is easily to overlook diagnosis. If we specifically talk about type A dissection and its clinical features, so as for the hemodynamics of type A dissection, these patients, they can be in any spectrum of the blood pressure. They can be having low blood pressure, they can be normotensive, or they can be hypertensive. Pseudohypotension is where BP is low in one arm only because the subclavian artery on that side is compromised by the dissection. That means that the patient's true blood pressure, which if you measure in the unaffected arm, can be normal or even elevated. These patients also present with syncope, although it occurs in a minority of these patients, but it carries significant mortality. Most commonly, this syncope comes from pericardial tamponade, but it can also happen from stroke or internal hemorrhage. If these patients develop cardiac tamponade, they can have the Beck's triad, which is basically distended neck veins, diminished heart sounds, and low blood pressure. These patients can have a new murmur that can originate from the aortic regurgitation, that if it occurs acutely, and it is quite pathognomic if you hear a murmur with chest pain. They can have a new MI. Although inferior is the most common area involved because of the right coronary ostium, but they can also have anterior MI. And if we give these patients thrombolytics or full anticoagulation, that is basically catastrophic. They can present with stroke like symptoms, so neurologic signs and symptoms, neurologic deficits. If I talk about the type B patients, the majority of these patients here, they will have elevated blood pressure, okay, more than 150 systolic, and that is going to be the driving force which must be controlled. They can also have syncope here and pulse deficits, although it is less common than type A. If the patient has got complications in their presentation, so if they have refractory pain, if they have got rapid aortic expansion or rupture, if the blood pressure is uncontrolled, and if there is any evidence of insufficient perfusion to renal, splanchnic, spinal, or lower extremity vasculature, then these are all indications for the patient to undergo surgery or some kind of endovascular intervention. Although we are classifying how type A or type B patients classically present, these patients in reality present on a spectrum. They can present as a GI mimic case, whereby somebody is going to come with soft abdomen with pain out of proportion and bloody stools, and you will find mesenteric ischemia, but the cause of it is going to be a dissection. They will come with nausea, vomiting, diaphoresis. They might come with an MI, and that could be because of dissection. They can come from heart failure, from pericarditis. They can have limb ischemia or some kind of renal colic. So all of this can lead to a delayed diagnosis of aortic dissection or even a missed diagnosis of aortic dissection. So then the question remains, is there any tool that can help us to assess pre-test probability of aortic dissection? We do have a score called ADD score. The AD score stands for Aortic Dissection Detection Score. It's a validated tool that combines 3 domains of clinical information. Okay, each domain scores 0 point or 1 point. The total you can score over here is 3 points. How it works is, first we screen the patients for any high risk conditions, and if any one of them are present, they will score 1 point. So if they have got Marfan syndrome, if they've got a family history of aortic disease, if they recently had an aortic valve disease, any recent aortic manipulation, any kind of surgery, or if they're known to have thoracic aortic aneurysm. Then we look at how is the chest pain and what are its features. Is the chest or abdominal pain, is it abrupt? Is it severe in intensity, and is it described by the patient as a ripping or tearing pain? Once again, if any of them is a yes, patient scores 1 point. And then we move on to our examination, where we check for pulse deficit, we check for BP difference between arms, we look for any focal neurologic deficit in conjunction with the pain, we auscultate for any murmur, and we are looking for any hypertension or shock state. So if the patient scores 0 on this score, that's basically a very low risk. If you combine it with D dimer, this has got a sensitivity of 99.7%, and basically you can stop CT. So if D dimer is negative, the score is 0, stop the CT. But if the score you get 1 or more than 1, or let's say 1, then you have to get a CT angio. If you score 2 or more than 2, even if your D dimer is negative, these patients are high pretest probability for having aortic dissection. But there is a caveat to this score. The caveat is, among patients with no clinical risk factors on the ADD score, half still had widened mediastinum on chest X-ray. This means that this score and chest X-ray provide complementary information, but neither of them on its own are often sufficient. Let's move next to diagnostic testing and where it stands and how useful all of these are. So we start with POCUS, which is any ED physician's favorite tool. This is indispensable in the initial assessment because it can be done bedside, it can be done in any hemodynamically stable or unstable patient with a suspected dissection. Then the question is, what are we looking for? So first thing we're looking for is there any pericardial effusion? Is there any tamponade physiology? Second thing is, we are going to look at the aortic root. So we will choose a left long axis parasternal view, and we are going to assess the aortic root for dilation or if we can see any kind of flap. Next, we are going to look at the descending aorta. Again, we are checking for the same things. Is there any dilation? Is there any flap? And we can also check if there is any, if our eyes are trained enough for it, we can check for aortic regurg on ultrasound with color Doppler. If not, we can always order a departmental one. The thing is that ultrasound is not going to definitively diagnose or rule out, but it's more of a complementary testing. It's going to add to your gestalt. Moving to chest X-ray. This is what everybody asks for, but what they don't know is that the sensitivity of chest X-ray is only about 67%, which is quite poor if you think about it. The widened aortic silhouette or mediastinum is what we look at, right? Basically, mediastinal widening is defined as width of more than 8 centimeter at the aortic knob level. The key thing over here is that a normal chest X-ray does not rule out a dissection. Now, D-dimer is great because it's sensitive, but it lacks the specificity for the diagnosis. If you rely on D-dimer alone, know that it is insufficient to rule out dissection confidently. You can use it in combination with the ADD score, and that helps to rule out a dissection confidently. D-dimer can be used in conjunction with the ADD score because it can help a physician rule out dissection confidently. There are other biomarkers that are getting investigated like myosin, fibrillin, but none of them currently have sufficient sensitivity to rule out dissection adequately. If we talk about ECG, some of the things we need to look for is, do they show a STEMI pattern? Is there a decreased voltage from the pericardial effusion? Is there any LVH from long-standing hypertension? But none of these ECG findings is very accurate or specific for aortic dissection. We do have advanced imaging which often work as the definitive tests. So we have got CT angio and the alternative to it, which is a transesophageal echo. CT angio is the initial imaging test of choice in all our patients. It's rapidly available, it is very fast, it is sensitive, and it is specific. It shows the flap, it shows where the involvement is if there is any pericardial effusion, if there are other arteries involved. The disadvantage is, however, obviously the radiation exposure to the patient, contrast exposure to the patient, particularly if they have got any contrast allergy, or if they have renal failure, or if the patient is too obese to fit into the scanner. That's where transesophageal echo comes in place, because it is portable. It can be performed at the bedside, especially if the patient is unstable. It is very sensitive for a type A dissection. It shows aortic valve status, pericardial space, left ventricle, can be performed if there is a qualified specialist to do so. But the disadvantage is this requires sedation for a patient and it is operator dependent.